Creepy times ahead. Join us as we talk about the strange, the unknown, and the unexplained. Things that shouldn't happen, but do. If it's nighttime where you are, dim the lights, sit back, relax, and listen intently as we explore the edges of reality. Welcome to Paratalk.
Sounds like a lot of supernatural baloney to me.
Supernatural, perhaps. Baloney, perhaps not.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Paratalk. I'm Gareth Davis, and once again I'm joined by paranormal enthusiast Reeves Cook. This week we step firmly into the Halloween season as we begin the first of a two-part Halloween special on Paratalk. This week we delve into the mysteries and haunting of Leap Castle in Ireland. Hello, Reeves.
Hello, Gareth. Yes, I thought that Leap Castle might be a good topic for our first part of our Halloween double bill.
I'm scared already.
Well, a lot of people have been scared when they've been in there, and they've been scared for a very long time, all the way back to the 12th century when it was built.
Mm-hmm.
It's like many old buildings that we go back hundreds and hundreds of years that have an immense amount of history. There's also an immense amount of murder and intrigue and double crossing and death. And the thing is that a lot of that takes place within the family, and families tend to kill off each other to gain power, to gain riches, just to gain a step up the ladder. They'll think nothing of sticking a knife or having someone bumped off, and they could be their own family, their own brother, their own sister. Just
When you hear stories like this, I mean, it's been so ingrained into popular culture. It seems like the plot of a book or a movie, but this really happened, right?
Real, yeah, definitely real. And it's I think for us that we live today, and we have a different mindset, a different our societies are completely different. I think back in the day, where you became, it was all clan based, and the family was everything, the family name was everything, and whoever was had the most power was the person that that pulled the strings. And I think that killing someone, I know it sounds horrible, but it was quite easy to do, and it was quite easy to get away with.
Well, because
there wasn't much repercussion.
No forensics back then either, right? So,
no, I mean.
They'd, if you staged it right, you'd get away with it completely. There's no DNA testing back then.
But the interesting thing with Leap Castle is that it's got a very checkered past, and it goes back to even before when the castle was constructed. As I said, the castle was constructed back in 1250 AD, constructed of stone, which is an interesting factor that we'll come back to. And it's in Kildare in Ireland, which is about 6 kilometers north of the town of Roscrea, which is, it's a nice area, put it that way. And the castle is in a very nice place.
Very
it's got a lot of
picturesque, beautiful countryside, I'm assuming.
How can I explain it to listeners? It's imagine a scenic castle, not a sprawling, huge castle, but a castle that a very powerful family would live in, which is basically like a very unarmored house. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, I think listeners, if you want to get an idea of what Reeves is describing, if you just fire up your web browser on your computer, go to Google and type in Leap Castle, Ireland. Now, when I say Leap, it's pronounced Leap, but it's spelt L-E-A-P. It's spelled leap. But it's Leap Castle, Ireland, and there's a lot of photographs you can look at of the castle and the area itself, and it really is. It looks like it's something out of a gothic horror movie, and it's spectacular. But very beautiful, very gothic, very kind of medieval.
Well, looking
vibe,
at it,
yeah.
you wouldn't think that some of these things that we're going to cover in this. I mean, there's so much more that's gone on in those grounds, but we're going to cover some of the most prominent ones today,
Okay.
and there's plenty to research out there. We're going to take it. We're going to take and start at the O'Carroll family and the death of the Lord of Ely, which is the father, and we're going to start from there. And there were
Okay.
two brothers. There was Thaddeus O'Carroll, and he had a younger brother, Tegan, which was the younger brother, and they had, like many families and brothers, especially males and male heirs, they had a
large
feud. They had a
family.
feud. Yeah, but they also had a feud. They didn't like each other. They both wanted to be, the Lord. They wanted to take over the power. And the thing was that what the younger brother didn't like was Thaddeus O'Carroll was a priest as well, and he believed that a priest wasn't the place for a priest to be the Lord of Ely, to be the Lord of the manor. It wasn't it wasn't deemed to be
It just wasn't
suitable.
done.
Yeah, it wasn't done.
I can kind of see that, though. If you're a member of the clergy, if you are a priest, to be the lord also of a large estate and the head of a family, it doesn't fit right. It's like you have to be one or the other. So I can kind of see that point of view.
Yeah. So anyway, this feud, it sparked and it came to a head one evening when Thaddeus was doing his mass. He had a church. They have a church in the ground, and all the family were in the church. And their mother begged Thaddeus to wait for the younger brother to come because he wasn't there before he started doing his reciting and his doing the normal stuff that you would do at a congregation. But he didn't take his mother's advice, and he started without him. And a short while later, the younger brother, with two of his right-hand soldiers, kicked in the door of the church and came strolling in and, was very angry that, how dare you start this without me? I'm important, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think by that time, Thaddeus had realized that he's not happy and something's going to happen. There was an altercation, and the younger brother drew his sword and ran him through and killed him there and then. So in front of the whole family, of course, the family, everybody went crazy and ran away and stuff. And of course, he said, I'm the man now. I'm in charge. So it was like from then on, for the next decade, he ruled the clan. He was the top man.
It's quite staggering when you think about it, Reeves. It's something like that, something so violent and horrific, brutal murder in front of multiple witnesses.
Yeah.
And there's no repercussions. It's fine.
It's a family matter. Yeah.
Today, something like that happening would be, there'd be a myriad of repercussions that would be handed down. Whereas back then, it was commonplace to, if you killed someone, it's like, oh, there you go, he's dead, move on.
But the interesting thing is, of course, he'd killed his older brother, and it was known then that the chapel got the name of the Bloody Chapel. It got, because of what had happened. But he'd killed his older brother. He'd taken the position of being the Lord, and the strange thing was that 10 years later, I think it was 10 years later, his cousin, Thaddeus' cousin, had double-crossed him and had him murdered. So it was like a strange kind of weird karma where, it's kind of like you get double-crossed, someone double-crosses you. And it's like in the perpetual wheel of deceit and everyone's power hungry and everybody wants to be in charge. So we go from there, and of course this is we got, this happened many years ago, a few hundred years ago. So over the years, there's been a number of reports of strangeness going on in and around the grounds and in the castle itself. For example, there is a priest's house where that was like the whoever was the clergy would stay in the house.
Right.
Visitors have stayed in the house, and they've reported numbers of, not just one but multiple visitors have reported seeing what they believe to be a cowled figure, which seems to appear in various places in this area and just disappear. So what we would coin an apparition, but an apparition that you don't have any interaction with. It's just maybe a projection.
Right,
as I said before, the buildings are all made of stone, so we've got that connection there with the whole stone tape.
So this is
we'll talk about
a residual haunting in regard to the cowled figure. There's no the figure is unaware of the people that are there. It's just going about its routine, kind of. It's as if it's trapped in the environment and replaying itself.
But other visitors have given the description that they've been asleep in their beds, and they've been attacked by an invisible person, basically an invisible force, and they've described it as someone assaulting them, but they can't see anyone. So you've got that interaction where you're being, something is there that's able to interact with you and give you a scratch or a slap or whatnot. And of course, we hear a lot about this where people suddenly have an arm that's suddenly burning and they look at it and they've got scratches on it and stuff like that. Yeah. So they've reported that they've had these encounters as well. So as well as just a visual, there is physical evidence as well of people being assaulted in the buildings. Now, the thing is that there is a number of other stories which have come down through the years, and people have seen. One of the main ones is a female that they've seen in the main building, and this female is dressed with a cloak, like with red. They've described it as a reddish cloak, and she seems incredibly angry. She has a dagger, and the people that have encountered her have been shocked because it's if the person jumps at them, they're running at them, as if they're going to stab you,
attack
and then they vanish. Yeah, but before it gets to that, they're gone. There was some research done, and whether it's hard to find because obviously going back hundreds of years, it's hard to find solid evidence. But apparently, back in the day, the clans would war with each other. And when I say a clan, I mean a family. So a family is a clan, and these families were very big, cousins, uncles, whatever. They all lived in a big castle, and they would war with each other. And sometimes they would have fights with other clan members, and they would take prisoners, and then they would obviously use them as a bartering tool to get money or whatever, or goods, to give them back, or they would keep them and use them as basically servants, slaves, which sounds a bit barbaric, but that happened.
It sounds horrific.
Well, allegedly, this lady was a member of a rival clan, and she was kidnapped by a group of O'Carroll males, and they took her back to the building, the castle, and they kept her prisoner. But they also assaulted her and had their way with her, and she got pregnant. And when she told them, "I'm pregnant, can you please let me go? Think of the child." Well, they didn't. They just murdered her. So, and then they just left her body. Another thing is they would leave bodies outside in and around their rivals' areas as
like a warning or a deterrent.
Don't mess with us.
Don't mess with us.
It was very barbaric, very.
Yeah, very.
very violent. Yes, and that's who this lady is. This spectre or this apparition is said to be, of someone who is constantly trying to fight their way out of some form of shackles. But as I say, I mean, it's it could be anything. Who knows?
Well,
But
that happens a lot, though, with hauntings, right? Where you see an apparition or a specter, and, in reality, you don't know who that is, but then you look through the history of the location, and you just pick the most likeliest candidate, whether you're right or wrong. I mean, who knows? But you just pick it must be this person, when in reality it might be something completely different.
Well, yeah, I think that with any case where you have an apparition or you have a haunting, as we've talked about before, it's always a good case to go back and not ask the people around that's experiencing it, but go back and research the history of the area and of the building, because there might be your answers. That might be the catalyst for what you're experiencing at that time. As I say, a lot of older buildings, castles, and buildings that go back hundreds of years, you can really only speculate, because there's not a lot of stuff written down, and a lot of it, when it's family feuds and stuff, all those people are dead and gone now, and it's it's in folklore or legend, or he said or she said. But there is a documented part of this that did actually happen, and there were two younger sisters, Emily and Charlotte. They lived in the castle many years ago, and they've been seen in and around the castle at different places. Emily, who was 11, I think she was 11 years old when she died. She died from a tragic accident. She was up on the battlements of the castle playing, and she slipped and fell to her death. Oof. And it's quite a massive drop. And visitors have noted and experienced seeing a young girl on the battlements falling and to her death. And when they run to the bottom where they think the body's going to be, there's no one there.
No one there,
so there is some form of playback there, whether it's an emotional playback or something that's connected with that, with the building in that area. Who knows? But people have witnessed it, and multiple people have witnessed it. As for her sister has been encountered in the building, in various rooms in the main building. Visitors have witnessed a young girl who. Now, here's an interesting thing. This is more of an intelligent haunting, because when they're in the building, they'll notice a little girl who comes up to them and asks them, "Do you know who my sister is?" And then she disappears. Now, you've got some interaction there.
Yeah, that's very interesting, though, because it's whatever this thing is, this specter, whatever you want to call it, it appears to be residual and intelligent.
Yeah.
Right, because there's got to be some, because it acts in a very residual way. In other words, it appears, goes through the same motions, and then vanishes.
Yeah.
But the intelligence part is knowing when somebody's in the room and approaching them and asking them to go through the routine.
Well, she's also been heard and encountered in rooms where she'll appear, materialize in a room, and she'll be sobbing, and as the people become aware of her, she'll just slowly fade away.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting to me, because usually it's one or the other. Like a residual haunting will pay no mind to the people observing it. And it'll just go about its business, go about its motions, just move on. It's nothing. But in intelligence, they're trying to get the attention of or interact with people. Whereas what you're describing with this little girl, it appears that it's doing both. Fascinating, yeah.
It is. Well, we get to a more the turn of the century, and this is where things start to get a bit even more weird with the whole castle and its hauntings and its strangeness, because we bring in what's been coined as the elemental.
Now, this is you're talking now about the beginning, right at the beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah.
So
right
about 100 years ago.
Yeah, that's when it was. That's when it was first documented.
Okay.
Now, the owners and occupants of the castle then was a Mildred Darby and her husband, and they took over. They moved in, and she was the first person to encounter this elemental. Now, to give any listeners that aren't versed in what this might be, if we think of an elemental as something that not necessarily has ever been human or has ever walked the earth, but it is an apparition in a humanoid form, in this case anyway, which it's benign. It's not very threatening in the sense of it doesn't jump at you or try and push you down the stairs or anything.
Would it be a good?
But it does.
Would a good explanation be? This is a ghost of something that has never lived.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's never walked the earth. It's never lived. It's never had a life.
Right.
But it is something. Whether as to what it is, in this case, there is a possibility and a story behind that. But Mildred was in one of the galleries one evening in the castle, and she was just admiring the art and stuff like that, and she suddenly smelt this putrid, rotting flesh, just a foul
disgusting
smell,
yeah.
Disgusting smell, and she was looking around, and she looked over her shoulder, and to behind her, a few feet away, she describes what looked like something the size of a sheep, which was mainly skin with bits of matted hair on it, and it had a humanoid face. It had hands and legs, but it was on all fours, and it was looking at her, but it had black holes for eyes. It didn't have any eyes. It just had dark sockets.
Right.
And it was looking at her, and as she looked at it, it didn't jump at her or anything, but it exuded fear and anxiety.
Like it was fearful of her, or I mean, obviously she was pretty scared, obviously, but
yeah, but. It wasn't scared of her. It was just there, and it wasn't moving or anything. It was just there, looking at her, and then it just obviously, after a while, it sort of, when she became aware of it, it just faded away, and it was gone. Now, that was the first encounter, but there was another encounter with other people, which were two servants in the house, and that they asked for permission of Mildred to put on a small event for some local soldiers at the local barracks in one of the outbuildings of the castle. And they put on this thing, and they went into the building, and all of a sudden they became aware of this smell, the foul smell again. And one of the people looked up on the rafters, these huge, if I can explain, if you go into an old castle, it has the old wood rafters that go up in the high ceilings. Yeah. If you up on the rafters, there was this, what they describe as this humanoid figure, which was hunched over, part hanging on the rafters, looking down at them, motionless. And of course, they completely freaked out. They all exited the building very quickly and ran out of the building, completely crazy, and
Well, that is kind of, when you think about it, that's a terrifying vision to actually witness something like that.
Yeah, But once again, they were stricken with immense fear. You know, they had to get away as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
They left the building, and the two people that worked for Mrs. Darby, they immediately gave in their notice, and they left the jobs the following morning, never to return.
Yeah.
They didn't want to work there any longer. So to give up your job, to give up your income, that has to be quite serious. Something that you've seen or experienced has shook you that much that you're like, I'm done with this.
You hear things like, I mean, you bring up a good point though, right? Because if this is your job, this is your livelihood, and you hear stories of like the thing that springs to mind is people who are hired to work in a hotel or a pub or a restaurant. Yeah. And they have to maintain the boilers or fix things down in the cellar. And they'll go down there to work on whatever they're working on. They'll have a paranormal encounter or a ghostly, a visitation. Yeah. And they'll go to their boss and they're like, "Yeah, I'm not going down there again.
Yeah.
I'm done." And even though that's their job, that's their livelihood, and they'll gladly say, "Yeah, you know what? I quit. I'm out." Because it's so absolutely terrifying.
I can't imagine being in a building all on my own and having that kind of experience. I know that people say, "Oh, well, it wouldn't, it's not, it can't hurt you," or but it's having that experience, because the trauma of having that experience all on your own, knowing that there's no one there to help you, and you're on your own, and I think that can be quite shake you up, even if you're the most open-minded person who is well-knowledged in the paranormal. It's still going to shake you up. Me anyway.
Well, no, it does. I think people who are paranormal investigators or ghost hunters, for the lack of a better word, who go on these vigils and search for evidence. Occasionally they'll have an encounter or accumulate evidence that absolutely terrifies them beyond belief. And maybe they'll stop doing it, or they're like, "There's no way I'm going back to that location." You know what I mean? Because it is so the terror, the absolute bodily mental terror that you experience is so overwhelming and so powerful that it's as if your very being, your body itself is like, "No, I do not want to experience that ever again."
Very hard to, I think also it's very hard to process mentally, to process something that you think shouldn't really be happening.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that you go into more of a panic mode at the sense of, this shouldn't be happening. Why is this happening? I don't understand why it's happening, and why am I experiencing it? Why have I been singled out to have this experience? I mean, I've experienced stuff in my life, and I've tried to explain it away, and some of the things I can't explain.
Right.
But I've never been in a house and seen a Roman soldier or a cavalier walk by. I mean, as much as that would be amazing to witness, I do think it would leave a mark on you.
But I think what bumps it, seeing it like like you said, like a Roman soldier or something walking through the living room or whatever. I mean, that would be scary, right? No, there's no question. It would be unnerving. But what if you were to witness something like very dark and sinister?
Yeah.
That would take it to a whole new level. When you would encounter something malignant, something that's oozing evil.
Yep.
And these things do happen. I mean, that would push you over the edge. If, like, in your flat where you're living right now, if something were to happen like that, you might seriously consider, like, I have to move. I can't live here anymore.
Yes. Yeah. No. I've often thought that. I've thought, this building was built in the 18th century, and it used to be a huge mansion, and there were lots of people that sort of lived here. And I suppose where I am at the moment, I'm in the basement, would have been either the kitchens or where
something like
where the
that.
servants would do their stuff. And I think that all those years of people doing stuff, and before it was all chopped up and made into apartments and stuff, and
Yeah.
I think all those years of people coming to work and toiling and
Right.
all the stuff that the family experienced and stuff, it's still here somewhere. It must be still here somewhere.
In the environment,
Possibly under the right conditions, something gets released. Or, I mean, as I say, I told the story of when I first moved in here, and I thought that a cat had come here near because I felt something run past my legs, and I looked and I thought, oh my God, there's a bloody cat in here, and there was no cat. I looked everywhere, there was no cat, but was it my imagination or very strange?
Yeah.
A very strange experience. But as we're talking about this, I mean, we can jump forward to 2006, where a witness who was in the castle.
I was just going to ask you. So this castle, which is like hundreds of years old, it's still standing today.
Oh yes,
and
it's still standing, and
there's still
being lived in.
phenomena.
Yeah. Oh yes, there still is. But in 2006, a witness who was in the building, he took a walk up. They got a spiral staircase that goes up to an upper level, and it leads into through a doorway into a long, very, very dimly lit hallway. And he went up the staircase, just exploring, and he goes through the door. And as he starts to walk into the hallway, which is not very well lit, he starts to smell sulfur. And he looks, and as his eyes adjust, because obviously there's less light in there.
Yeah.
As his eyes are adjusting, he looks into the hallway, and he's looking and he's thinking, what am I seeing? I'm seeing a hunched up shape in down in the corner of the floor, by the wall. What is that? And this shape then looks up and looks directly at him, emotionless, just stares at him. And for that moment, he thought, it's going to jump at me. Whatever it is, he thought it was an animal. It's going to jump at me. And he slowly backs off, away, back down the hallway, keeping his vision, seeing this thing to make sure it's not going to jump at him. And he walks back through the doorway, and he pulls the door closed and locks it, and makes his way quickly down the staircase, thinking, I'm not going back up there, and that door's locked. So whatever's up there is staying up there.
Yeah.
So he had an experience like that. So there has been research, and some say that this elemental is nothing to do with any of the paranormal activity that's happened in the castle. Is that it goes back much further than that. Now, legend has it that way before there was a castle and a building there, that this area was an area where druids were allegedly did their thing, and that they were the ones that conjured this elemental to basically protect the land and the area where they were based. So,
I'm looking at the Wikipedia page for Lep Castle, and they're speculating, because I don't think anyone knows definitively, but they're speculating that this castle was built in 1250, which means it was built in the 13th century.
Yeah.
Which is a very long time ago.
A very long time.
And what's unusual from my perspective is for something that old to still have paranormal phenomena taking place, because residual hauntings, while are commonplace, they diminish over time.
Yeah.
They get less, like they kind of fade away as the years go by. So the fact that something from the 13th century is still active is kind of unique and pretty strange.
Well, yeah. I mean, as I say, we'll get back to the druids and the whole, protecting the area. There was the 8th Earl of Kildare, Gerald Fitzgerald. He laid siege to Lep Castle in 1513. He was a rival who wanted to overtake the castle, and it's said that he dabbled in the dark arts, and that previous battles that he'd won, he'd only won them because he'd been dabbling in black magic and witchcraft, and which gave him the upper hand, and that's why he won. But unfortunately, with Lep Castle, he wasn't so lucky and didn't win. But another little snippet here: the O'Carroll family, they got together with a rival clan, the McMonaghan's, and they decided that we're going to become allies because we have a battle, and we're going to work together because it's in our common interest. And they went to battle together as allies, and they won the battle, great victory. And they said, "Come back to the castle, bring your guys back to the castle. We're gonna have a big dinner. We're gonna have a big dinner, and we're gonna celebrate, and we're gonna look at all the booty we've got, and and we're gonna share the wealth and the winnings and stuff." But what the O'Carrolls did, there was like 40 of these chaps. They poisoned all the food, so all of their allies were poisoned and died an agonizing death. And then they took all the bodies and buried them all in around the castle area to hide them, so that they just vanished. And so that wasn't very nice of them. But anyway, so let's just whiz forward again to 1922. Now, in 1922, we had some of the castle outbuildings were on fire. There was a civil war, and some say it was the Irish, the IRA that they'd done some arson to some of the buildings, and some say that it was landlords that had burnt some of the outbuildings because of rent that hadn't been paid and money that was owed, so they took their revenge to burn some of the property. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. It's that happened, and the buildings were damaged. Well, the chapel was damaged, quite badly damaged, and it was like that for quite a long time until builders came to clear the area, and it noticed that there was part of the wooden floor had been burnt quite badly, so they decided to move all of the wooden floor up and relay it and clean it up. When they removed the wooden floor, they noticed that there was a hidden area in the building, and it was an oubliette.
Like a basement or like a underground something, or
for those that don't know what an oubliette is.
Yeah, I don't know what is that. What is it?
So an oubliette is it's another word for to forget about, and it's you get them in castles. It's basically a big pit, stone pit, normally with stakes in the bottom. And if you had, they were usually in castles, tucked away in castles. And if you had rivals that you didn't like, you got them and you threw them down the oubliette, and they would fall down and get impaled on the spikes. And then they would stay down there, and they would be forgotten about and die, basically. So it was basically a pit of death, and it was in a castle. You would throw your rivals down there and then forget about them. And then they would be screaming and help me, and
that was it.
And ha ha ha, you'll die and I'm eating my chicken,
Yeah.
So it was found that there was this oubliette, and it had all the spikes on, and on closer inspection, there was the bodies of, I think it was the total amount of bodies as in skeletons. There was 140 bodies. Oh my God. Brought out. So that's 3 cartloads of bones that were brought out from the oubliette from all of the years.
They'd murdered 140 people by throwing them
over
down
the years.
There.
Over the years,
wow.
Yeah. So over the years, there was 140 people that had gone down that oubliette for one reason or another and left to die. And here's the crazy thing. Now, we've come to the end of our story, but not finally, but on a footnote to the end of the story, which is an amazing, creepy twist to this. And there's so much more. Mm-hmm. You can go out there and read so much more on Lep Castle and investigations. And it's a fascinating place. And if you ever get the chance, you should, because they do stayovers and they do ghost hunts and all that. So,
Yeah.
But here's the thing. When they finally cleared out, they found some personal belongings from people who had gone down the oubliette, And the most recent personal belonging was a pocket watch dating from the 1800s.
What?
So someone in the 1800s went down that oubliette.
Like they must have fallen.
Were they fallen? Were they murdered? Did they get rid of a body? Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah,
now,
fascinating.
The current occupant, Sean Ryan, who's a musician, and his wife, Anna Callahan, they bought the building as basically a livable wreck, and they live in the main building at the moment, and they're doing it up slowly, but they make their money through
tourism,
doing tourism, ghost hunts, and stuff like that, and people go there to do film documentaries and stuff. So they're getting it back together, but there is still. He's seen apparitions. He's seen the apparitions of the little girls. He's seen many apparitions. So is his wife, and lots of people that have gone there. You can go there to visit, and they've had experiences as well. So it is very much still an active building. And I think that with all of the crazy things that have gone on there over the hundreds of years, as we say, the emotional charge that's most probably gone into the stone and into those buildings. With something like this, and you're saying 100, we say 140 people went down an oubliette. That building is most probably supercharged.
There's a lot of energy.
And so that's why I think there is possibility that there is still paranormal phenomenon going on there today.
Well, I've noticed. I was just looking through the Wikipedia article on Lep Castle. I've noticed that a lot of television shows have been there, especially ghost hunting shows. Some of the most notable being Most Haunted did an episode there. Ghost Hunters, Taps, they did an episode there, and also the Ghost Adventures team with Zach Bagans.
Yeah,
they did an adventure there, on their Halloween. They did a Halloween special at Lep Castle. Fascinating story, Reeves. Perfect for the Halloween season. Some great stuff. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for listening to this edition of Paratalk. Please, if you can, go ahead and give us a review. Open up your podcasting app of choice and give us a review, whether it be on iTunes. The review just helps people find the show. And we'll be back next week with part 2 of our Halloween special. And we'll be back very soon with another edition of Paratalk.